Hallo alles, ik ben Lisa.
What? I'm Nick.
Und du hörst zu Es braucht zwei, ein Podcast, bei dem zwei Personen haben zwei gleiche Filme gesehen. Also, und dann haben wir eine Diskussion.
Stop showing off the fact that you are far more bilingual.
I just thought it was appropriate for the episode. I'm not going to speak any more German because I don't think I can formulate sentences quick enough when we're having an off-the-cuff discussion. But
okay, so for the people who don't speak German, what the hell did you just say?
Hi everyone, I'm Lisa, and you're listening to It Takes Two, a podcast where two people, I think what I said was where two people watch two of the same movie, and then we have a discussion.
Makes sense.
Which is close enough to what I normally say. But my German isn't good enough to give a direct translation for what we normally say.
All right. We watched the Netflix adaptation of All Quiet on the Western Front and 1917.
Yes.
Both movies about World War I.
Mm-hmm. Both movies about young soldiers on the Western Front.
Yeah.
This is a listener suggestion. And by listener suggestion, I mean this episode was suggested by my manager, who's a good friend of both of ours.
But more importantly, he's a listener.
And we take listener suggestions. So if you have suggestions.
Yeah, so you've got a suggestion. Chuck it in the Discord. Discord link is in the footnotes.
The show notes.
Show notes.
Footnotes if we're a book.
I'm a book. No. Yeah. That's going to end up in the you are you and I am me argument again. Where do we start? Okay. I have seen 1917. This will be the third time I watched it.
Okay.
So the third time being for this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I had not seen the Netflix adaptation of All Quiet on the Western Front, which is originally a book, but
you've seen one of the previous adaptations.
I had seen the CBS made-for-TV movie that stars Ernest Borgnine, so I knew what was going to happen in the movie, but the adaptation from the movie I'd seen previously, I'm not going to say did the movie better, I'm just saying there were certain sequences which were way more hard-hitting in the CBS version.
Okay. Which
is interesting to me because I think there is a common trend, I think since Hurt Locker won the Oscar, there's been a trend within directors to make the movies about war way less glamorous. It's not, not everything can be, oh my god, what's the movie with,
Saving Private Ryan?
No.
I don't know. I don't know.
That's gritty and real. There's a movie with Nicolas Cage and he...
Bad Lieutenant?
No. I think it's Wind Talkers.
I've never even heard of that one.
And it's his job to protect the code talkers who are talking in their Native American language. And the friggin' opening sequence, because I think it was made by Spike Lee, is bananas.
Okay.
He runs down a hill and shoots a 1911 from full clip to empty and hits every single person, and he's running down a hill and firing it off the side like it's just nothing. And then there's a moment where his mate explodes and he just screams, and it's such a fantastic opening to a movie because it is bananas. Did we watch the movie with Alyssa Milano in it? Did I make you watch Commando?
Commando, yeah.
You know how when he's throwing grenades and people are doing backflips?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like that, but it's supposed to be a gritty, realistic war movie. But anyway, my point being, the directors putting realism into movies and not making them superhero action-y movies, less Captain America, First Avenger, and more rats eating the inside of corpses.
Well, I mean, I think from what I know of the book is very anti-war to begin with.
Yeah. Most people who have fought in wars are very anti-war.
Yeah, well, it's written by someone based on their own experiences. They're both based on real experiences. So, All Quiet on the Western Front is based on a book, and the book was inspired by the real experiences of the author, whereas 1917 is loosely inspired by the autobiography of the director's grandfather, who was a messenger in World War One.
Do you know what else World War One what's the word? Aspired? No, what's the word?
Inspired?
Inspired, thank you.
What, World War One inspired?
Yeah.
The Lord of the Rings, is that what you're going to say?
No, I was going to say World War Two. Because guess who else fought in World War One and hated it? Adolf Hitler.
Right. Yeah, because I was thinking, when we were watching 1917, I was thinking we could just, like, if there was a cut of The Two Towers and Return of the King where it was only Sam and Frodo's scenes, you could compare those.
Yeah. No, because there's definitely the similarities between Blake and what is his name? Starts with S. The other man.
In 1917?
Yeah.
Schofield.
And Kat and Paul.
Yeah, Powell Boimer.
Yeah, I can't speak German.
You can say Powell. Rather than Paul.
Max Powell.
Some anglicizing his name. Paul Baumer.
Yeah, Paul Baumer.
Yeah, Powell Boimer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You continue.
You were in the middle of a sentence. I just corrected you on his pronunciation.
Right, I thought you were talking about how you could just edit Lord of the Rings down. So it's just a...
Oh, yeah. I think that there's a similarity between... I just think that... Because the Lord of the Rings, I think The Hobbit in particular, but then the Lord of the Rings by extension, was written based on Tolkien's experiences at war. And I think that the story in 1917, which is largely two soldiers together crossing no man's land and dangerous territory to try and get a message that, and the reason they're going, just the two of them, is to get there quicker and less detected and whatever, that's literally Sam and Frodo getting into Mordor to destroy the Ring of Mountain.
But instead of a ring, it's orders not to attack the German line.
Yeah. But you know what I mean? Like, there was, like, I was watching 1917, I was like, I can understand how Tolkien's experience in the war led to him writing those stories.
Yeah.
And also, on that note, apparently in the other famous adaptation of All Quiet on the Western Front, it ends, I'm going to, spoiler alert, I guess, always spoilers on this show, but apparently in the previous adaptation, it ends with Powell going home and finding that because of what he's witnessed and what he's lived through, he can't connect with people anymore.
Do you know what version that is?
I'm sure I've taken it down as a note. The 1930 version of it.
Yeah.
So that's, but it was not in this version of it because it wasn't in the book.
Right.
So this one I think is more true to the book, but that was what the purpose of both The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, like the endings of them are, is that these people who've gone out and done these things, they come back to a place that's like the people there have no experience or knowledge of what's happened, and the person is irreparably changed and can't connect with people anymore.
Yeah. Because talking of Saving Private Ryan, so then also Tom Hanks produced Band of Brothers, and then because Band of Brothers did so well, they made The Pacific, and The Pacific has that at the ending, which right. I think Band of Brothers really doesn't have as much like following the characters. It's war's hell, and these movies don't shy away from the gritty realism.
Yeah. I think 1917 shies away from it a lot more.
Yeah, but there's not... In comparison to the two movies, 1917 has, like, no combat in it.
Yeah, and only 4 on-screen deaths.
Yeah.
Whereas in All Quiet on the Western Front, there's like a death every 10 seconds.
Yeah,
there's like people exploding in front of your eyes, and you're like, whoa.
Yeah, and when the core crew, you get one of the guys who wants to become what does he want to do? He wanted to become a military police officer.
Yeah.
He gets shot in the leg. So in his response to that, when he's in hospital, I say hospital, he's lying in a courtyard on a stretcher with a bunch of other people. He just like takes a fork and ends his own life by stabbing himself repeatedly in the neck. Their other mate gets burned by French flamethrowers. I can't remember the other dead. Well, one of them just like runs off.
Yeah, he just dies off screen.
Yeah.
Franz. He dies off screen. It's sad. There's a shot at the beginning when they're all like marching.
Yeah.
And the order that they're marching is the order they die in.
Oh.
But it's I like.
Wait, you're gonna say you like a war movie?
Stop
the presses.
Yeah, I'm not a war movie fan. No, I like the anti-war sentiment of All Quiet on the Western Front. Like, I like the arc that we go on with Powell, because at the beginning, so both these movies start in the middle of a war. They start in 1917.
Yeah.
In both cases, the war started in 1914, so it's, it's ongoing. In 1917, the movie, not the year, the Schofield and Blake are both lance corporals, and they've clearly been there for a while.
Yeah.
In the positions they're in, they've been there. I don't think it said how long they've been there, but they're well established. They've been out there for a long time fighting, because they're talking about times that they've had leave in the past to go home and things like that. So they've been around for quite a while. All Quiet on the Western Front starts off with a group of soldiers being sent over the top of the trenches and all just being obliterated.
Yeah.
And then their uniforms are washed and given to new recruits.
Yeah. Repaired.
Washed and repaired, like the bullet holes sewn up and then handed over to new recruits. And when we meet Powell and his friends, they are...
he forges his father's signature.
Yeah. So his friends are all... So are they finished... Are they going from... I don't know, is it school or university? Or like, is it like secondary school?
I think they're going... If the war wasn't on, they'd be going to university.
Right. And so he's supposed to be going home, whereas his friends are all going to war.
Yeah.
And they convince him to forge his parents' signature so that he can go to war.
Yeah.
So they're like all excited about the glory of it and whatever. And, and I hate glorification of war. I think war shouldn't happen. I think this movie, I think there's faults that annoy me, but there's, generally speaking, in All Quiet on the Western Front, for the most part, they don't glorify it, but they show that people do glorify it and did glorify it, and they show how the glorification of war leads to exploitation of young and vulnerable people.
Yeah.
Especially men. And so it's these guys, all being like, oh, we're gonna do our country proud and we're gonna like get out there and whatever, and then by the end of it, or by like halfway through, they're all terrified and like awful things are happening and they just want it to end, they just want to get home, they just want to survive. And by the end of it, then you've got a great sequence where Powell jumps, like he's just fighting and he like jumps down into the trenches and is like just slaughtering people, and it's brutal because at that point he's just gone. He's just the guy that we knew from the beginning of the movie, even though it's only taken place over It's a year and a half, right? Isn't it a year and a half?
I think it's 18 months is the number that was mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a year and a half.
I know.
So I think it's from like April 2017. Oh, sorry, 2017, 1917, April 1917 to November 1918.
Yeah.
Is the timeline of it. And he's a totally different person. And he's just, by the time that last fight is happening, he's just switched off. And it's that, like, machine that they kind of show in that, like, we got to see it happening, right? We got to see the end of the journey for a whole group of troops, and then we get to see from beginning to end of this next group.
Yeah.
And that it's, you know, if it hadn't had the ceasefire or whatever there, it would have just kept churning it out. Yeah, so I really appreciate how they did that, how they showed that in actual fact, the people, you know, because really, you know, the war, and they show this in both films to an extent, like, a lot of the war is just people who are higher up who don't actually have to do any of the fighting, not giving a shit about the lives of the people that they're sending out to die, and just being like, yeah, just send more of them out to die, and they don't care, and it's just so that they can get more power.
Yeah.
And I mean, a whole lot of the fighting that was happening on that Western Front, which is, you know, where both films are set, is just, they spent, I think, like, I can't remember the exact figure, but it was like 3 million people died on that Western Front, and all they did was move the line a couple hundred meters in each direction.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It is absolutely ridiculous that it happened at all.
Yeah. Warfare went on. It was the evolution of warfare from, we'll say from American Revolution to the Civil War, where, you know, back from medieval era, which was just two armies met on a pre-agreed battlefield and fought each other, and then whoever won lost. With the, don't quote me because I'm not a historian, but with the with artillery and obviously chemical weapons, which were invented in for World War One, like the whole concept changed, and I think it was the general in All Quiet on the Western Front talking about, you know, it's just a game of chess. The difference being that in a game of chess where you sacrifice one pawn for, like, the greater good of your army, unfortunately your one pawn doesn't become a pawn, like a singular individual. It's a squad. It's a platoon. It's a entire battalion.
Yep.
But yeah, artillery really changed the game, because you could hit people from really far away accurately. Yeah, trench warfare is a shit show because, yeah, you basically, everyone gets dug in and that's it, and you end up with, like, the photos you can see, there's quite a few of them online of, like, the landscape of France and where they fought and how it's still a mess today, is insane, because, like, even erosion's not taking care of that, but, you know, it's only been, you know, has it been 100 years? It has, hasn't it? Yeah,
it's been over 100 years.
Yeah, it's been over 100 years.
105 years since these films were set.
Yeah.
Coming up on 106 years since in April, it'll be 106 years.
But, like, it's like the evolution of everything. It's like plane combat. And, you know, from the technological jump from the tanks they had in World War One to the tanks they had in World War Two, the deployment they could have, you know, Operation Market Garden, which is where the Americans parachuted into occupied Europe. Like, so much changed in a very short amount of time.
But even, like, the tanks were, you know, a huge thing.
Oh yeah, they had nothing. You couldn't do anything about it.
Because like there's a sequence in All Quiet on the Western Front.
Really well done.
It's horrifying. Because they've just like overtaken a French trench.
And because they're all starving, instead of like fighting anymore, they just find food.
Yeah, they find food and there's like rats crawling around and they're covered in mud and blood and they just start picking up the food and shoving it in their mouths and then the ground shakes. And when they look over, these tanks are coming towards them and they can't do anything. They're like shooting at them and they just come towards them and one of the tanks comes down into the trench and just
runs a dude over.
Yeah, just absolutely crushes this guy. And then they seem totally shocked to see them. They weren't like they have no idea how to fight against them.
Yeah.
They weren't trained for this, and then you get the guys with the flamethrowers come out.
Yeah.
And start just blasting them. And so even the technological advances there, I don't like the troops on the front line weren't expecting those or didn't seem to have any awareness that was what they were going to be facing.
It's interesting too because there was a lot of old school thoughts still running around in World War One, and it's like both the Americans and the Germans adopted like a muted color for some form of like camouflage.
Yeah.
The French were still wearing like blue.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, the evolution of camouflage from then to like, what's easy to mass produce. Well, you just, the good guys all wear green and the bad guys wear like grey to black. It's a standard, how do you write shittiness? And it's just that sort of standard look, except the French who are running around like literal Smurfs.
Yeah.
It's like that's not.
But it's like apparently British soldiers were not supposed to run across when they got out of the trenches because it's undignified. You had to walk.
Yeah, it's the same as when they had musket lines.
Yeah.
You just like march into the enemy fire, and then you like when you get within like optimum firing range is when your commander tells you to fire. It's like that worked when a good musketman could fire 3 rounds in a minute.
Yeah.
Versus like you saw it in the movie and they're not even aiming, but they're emptying their clips of their I think it was a 30 Mauser. I can't remember. I get a lot of brain crossover between the rifles and armaments from World War II and One mixed together. But yeah, they'd like literally nothing in comparison to like having to individually reload every round.
Yeah.
There was a lot of stupid shit that happened in World War One.
Yeah.
Because of just
the crossover in technology. Advances happening as they're fighting.
Yeah.
Over the years.
And it's that old saying is we learn how to fight the previous war when the next one starts.
Right. Yeah.
Like the perfect example of why in the beginning America's tactics didn't work in Vietnam because they'd gone from fighting in Europe and Korea to trying to fight in big open stretches where you could dig lines, you knew where the enemy was, you were fighting over ground, versus Vietnam, which was just like they attacked you and then disappeared and they were fighting in guerrilla warfare.
Yeah.
And then of course they went from fighting in the jungle to then invading countries that don't have jungles or trees, and everything changed again, and it's interesting that this concept still existed when they had mustard gas and artillery, that they were like, no, just walk, you'll be fine. We're blue out in the middle of the open.
Yeah, it's bizarre.
Yeah.
But it's all like a facade. But I mean, you see that even with the I think in both films they do it. They use like costume as a kind of storytelling device to show the characters like state of mind.
Yeah.
I think it's very deliberate in 1917, but I'm pretty sure they do it in All Quiet on the Western Front as well, where it's like at the beginning they're all pristine and fully outfitted out or whatever, and then it gets worse and worse, and in 1917 he's like his hat is gone and his jacket and whatever, and it's giving up on this facade of we must be presentable at all times. We
Yeah.
must do exactly this. And then you get that shot in 1917 where he gets out of the trenches and just sprints across it to try and stop the, try and get the message across and stop the troops from going over and dying.
I have to say one thing about war movies, and this is, I think, a very big generalization, but I find it sits out with war movies more than other movies. The cinematography is amazing. It's fucking gorgeous from start to finish.
The cinematography of 1917 is stunning.
Yeah.
It's absolutely beautiful. And that's coming from a person who hates war movies.
Yeah.
It is a beautifully shot film.
The moment when I first watched it, the moment where I was realizing, like, as the viewer of watching the movie for the first time, that, like, the cinematography was going to be the main star of the entire movie. So when they climb out of they get the flares, they climb out, they get the orders, they get the flares, they climb out of the trench, and his hand gets stabbed by the barbed wire when they're crossing no man's land. And it's that sequence where they go into the crater and there's a dead body next to him with rats all over it, and Schofield recoils in horror from it. And then Blake jumps into the pit, sees another person buried, like, face level with him, which is like a screaming skull at this point, and then falls backwards onto Schofield, and you watch him put the hand that he just stabbed in barbed wire into, like, a dead body, and you're just like, oh, no. Basic hygiene, and he's just like, oh, just, fix it, when they get to the end, it's just like, oh, you gotta bandage it up, and he just, like, pours water on it, and it's just like, no, it's like a rotting corpse that you touched with an open wound. Like, if you don't get sepsis, I'd be very surprised. The amount of shit he goes through, and I'm just like, like, the biggest, for an example, the biggest killer for the American Civil War was not combat.
It was sepsis.
It was disease and illness from sitting in trenches. Well, not trenches, because they didn't have trenches then, because trenches were an invention of World War. Well, I'm pretty sure main use of trenches was like built trenches. Was an invention of, because we saw it in what the hell was the movie we watched twice, because one of them was just bizarrely long.
Dance with the Wolves.
Dance with the Wolves. Like, they had, like, fences.
Yeah.
And that was it. And they would, like, build fences or, put some posts together as some form of, cover just outside of range of each other. But yeah, that whole sequence.
Again, the muskets and the
exactly.
if you're like, if you have to squint to see them, then you're not going to be able to reach them with your gun.
Yeah, like one of the really screwed up stories is, I can't remember if it was the Revolutionary War. It must have been the Revolutionary War. The guy who invented the Gatling gun. Okay. The reason he invented it. So, the Gatling gun, so it was a hand-cranked gun that had a gravity-fed magazine from the top. Okay. So a person would turn it, like, with a crank handle. Yeah. And it would load each shell and fire at the bottom, so it would load at the top and go through and cycle through. So it was a very, very rudimentary style of machine gun, basically. Hand cranked, which had problems because people would get excited and crank too fast and it would ruin the whole timing of the mechanism. But the reason the guy invented it was because he'd lost all his kids, like his sons, during the war. Right. And he was just like, well, if I can come up with this thing that can fire way faster, they'll need less children to go on the battlefield. It's like, no, you're just going to kill more children. Like,
Yeah, it's tough.
If I build this giant bomb, no one will use it and everyone will be scared to go to war with each other. It's like, no, then you just end up in this weird system.
It never works that way.
Where you are now, where everyone's terrified of everybody else. So you just fight shadow wars by paying one side and supplying one side with armament and shit. And it's just like, this current point in time, hopefully it doesn't escalate and hopefully some, like, cooler heads come around. But it's like, no one was going to attack Russia. So everybody used the opportunity not to let Ukraine get rolled over by just funding and giving Ukraine a bunch of shit to fight Russia with.
Yeah.
Like, because Russia, you know, you're looking at it, how it would have gone if they hadn't have had the, you know, they lost Crimea and they basically got rolled over. And then, like, it was weird because I was like the only body talking about it for ages.
In the world?
No, not in the world. I'm just saying, like, within being a New Zealander, we're so far away from Europe. Like, most people don't really give a shit. And it's just like, hey, you guys watching what the hell's going on in Ukraine at the moment? Everyone's like, what's going on in Ukraine? I'm like, literally, like, the Russians being like, oh, well, it's not our troops. They're literally on weekend. It's like, we can't control what they do on their time off. It's like the same guys who are fighting in the other, like, weird wars they've had around their border. Like, you can understand it from both points of view. Like, the agreement, I think, was 91, 94. Russia said, well, like, you can keep your sovereignty, but we don't want the UN, not the UN, the EU building closer, like, keep building military bases closer and closer to our country, like you're encroaching on our border, and that just everybody just keep pushing the limit. And there's a lot of that in the Middle East as well, where it's just like, well, you know, you could be a sovereign country in the middle and just being played as somebody else's big pawn in a war that, you know, will affect only the people that live there, and it really sucks. Sorry, did I go for a big rant? You're just like looking on your face like what? Yeah. Sorry.
I was gonna segue into something and then you
changed the subject.
You changed the subject about 5 times.
Yeah.
So I was gonna say you had ancestors who fought in World War One, right?
I'm not 100% sure. Probably. I'm pretty sure that bayonet up there and those but no, I was going to say sunglasses.
Binoculars.
The binoculars are from World War
Two. Yeah.
Which are family heirlooms.
Yeah. You know what my ancestors were doing during World War One, did you?
Starving to death?
No, they were taking advantage of the fact that the British troops were out of Ireland and starting a revolution.
Oh, right.
To become an independent country.
Makes sense. It was like most of the time, people forget the other victims. Like, for World War... You've got a weird look on your face.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I'll explain. Because you know how, talking of what your independence, you know how India got independence, eh?
I vaguely.
So to fund the war effort in World War II, the UK basically bankrupted their entire country, and then at the end were like, oh, we don't need you anymore, you can have your independence now.
Here you go.
Yeah.
You wanted freedom, right? There you go.
Yeah.
No money, though. But...
We can't afford to keep policing you, so we're just going to leave.
Yeah. Anyway, what I was going to say was not back to the movies. I was going to say, if you at home had relatives that fought
I see what it is.
Yeah, you'd see where I'm going with this. If you at home listening had relatives who fought in World War One or World War Two or anything where they were photographed 100 years ago or so, and you have those photographs, and they're old and maybe a bit worn, or you know, just the fact that they're you know, monotone, they're sepia or grayscale. If you would like to get those photos restored or colorized or both, you can do so at photorestorenz.com. And you can even get 25% off if you use the promo code ITTAKES2 when you check out.
I'm speechless. That was such a good segue.
Yeah, I was like, oh, we're talking about war. We can get into this. You know, we're talking about a real war that happened 100 years ago. If people have photos.
It doesn't just have to be photos of dead relatives.
Yeah, so you can be. It can be anything.
From the Great War in World War Two or Vietnam or Gulf War or whatever.
Any war that anyone.
It doesn't just have to be war, folks. If you just have a regular photo, they do that as well.
Yep. So if you got any photos, even digital photos that you've taken, that are just a little blurry or they've been compressed by social media, you don't have the originals anymore, you can get those restored. So they use an AI that they've designed to restore photos. We've talked about it in depth in the last couple of episodes because I got a bunch of photos done for them.
And those examples are actually on a Discord.
Yes.
So you can see before you buy, because I think a lot of people... Because the word AI at the moment is getting thrown around in the trash because, there's digital artists out there who physically paint digital paintings, and then you can go onto a website and be like, I want a picture of a stegosaurus riding Bill Clinton over the no man's land in World War One, and it'll go blip, and there's your image.
And the problem is that a lot of the big open source kind of AIs out there are using databases of real artists and using their copyright material without their permission.
Yeah.
So this is not that. This is an AI designed by the owners of the company specifically to restore photos, and they do a pretty darn good job.
Yeah, they come together a picture of a chimpanzee out of other pictures of the same chimpanzee.
Yep.
They had to teach it to...
Yeah, not even just a chimpanzee, like they went and found the specific chimpanzee.
That's crazy.
Yeah, because they're a pretty new company, so I'm excited to see them, get on their feet and get more customers. So if you've got any photos, also, I think I mentioned it with the previous episodes, but they're like ridiculously cheap in my opinion. So even without the 25% discount, it's a really good value for your money. So yeah, if you've got, people's birthdays coming up or something like that.
Anniversaries, grandparents, something along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got, parents or grandparents who have old black and white photos of themselves that you want to get colorized and
break into your grandparents' house, steal their wedding photos, send them to the website, use our promo code It Takes Two in checkout, then replace them with crispy colorized things and never tell them.
I should mention also that one of the things they've done with the photos that I sent them is like they've made basically really high resolution images, so like they're much larger images, so you can get photos that were originally pretty small photos that you've scanned and put through, and you'll be able to get back one that's high enough quality that you can like print it on a larger scale if you want to. So a really good gift for someone else, or a really good gift for yourself. Just buy yourself some photos.
Buy yourself a photo of yourself.
I mean, I'll probably use it again but I'll put more thought into what I want to get next time, because last time I was like, well, let's just throw things at this and see what it does.
Let's try it out. So yeah, with that promo code, It Takes Two, 25% off. Yeah.
Anyway.
Photo Restore with an F.
Yes, I forgot to mention it's with an F. Yes, photorestorenz.com, and it's photo with an F, so FOTO or ESTORENZ.com.
You're fun just spelling that out. All right.
Back to the movies.
Back to the movies. No, it's they're both really well done. Like, what I will touch on, the moments that from the I'm going to look this up at what date it was. Hang on, bear with me for 2 seconds. The CBS made-for-TV movie.
Oh, okay.
The reason I brought that up is because there was 1979. Do you know who Ernest Borgnine is?
I know the name. I can't picture him, but I'm sure I've seen him in things.
This guy.
Okay.
No, not super familiar.
This is an audio media, so the
right, yeah.
The folks at home didn't just see that picture because we're not recording any video.
So what was the latest stuff that he did?
I know the name.
Yeah.
Certainly.
He's in. Wow, he did a lot of stuff.
Yeah, a lot of actors from that era are in.
So the TV show that I watched him in the most, he was in Magnum P.I., but there was a show, Earwolf. Earwolf.
Earwolf.
Earwolf.
Oh, Airwolf.
So it was like Knight Rider.
Okay.
Except a attack helicopter.
Oh, lovely. All right, sounds good.
So the two sequences that I thought were
that was just an aside, and it's not relevant to what you were actually saying.
No, it is relevant.
Okay.
So he plays Cat's role.
Okay.
In the TV movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he plays the mentor, the veteran that's been there for a long time and telling the you kids to, like, you know, not die, not be unalived by the French. The
Stanislaus Kaczynski is Cat's full name in the thing.
Yeah, I could not say that if you paid me to. I can barely speak English. Why did I choose a podcast? I have no idea. My point being, so the two sequences that really stuck out from the...
They stuck out, did they?
Yeah, from the movie with Ernest Borgnine is the sequence where he ends up in the trench with the French soldier.
Mm-hmm.
And spoilers, their entire podcast is spoilers, but spoilers, Cat's death.
Yeah.
So in the book and the adaptation with Ernest Borgnine, the sequence where please pronounce his name for me again. Powell.
Yeah, you just pronounce the A and the U separately, as if you just pronounce the two different letters.
Okay.
Powell. Yeah.
When he ends up in the trench during you know a crossing over no man's land, a push, he ends up in a trench. In this version, the French guy ends up getting blown into the trench and he stabs the shit out of him, and then like feels guilt and tries to help him and he dies. In the TV version that I'd watched previously to this, he gets stabbed and it's like he stabs him and the same thing sort of happens. It's at night and he stabs him in the stomach. Mm-hmm. And then again has the sequence where he's like feels guilty and he tries to help him and he literally through the entire night, because he can't leave because he doesn't know which direction his line is.
Yeah.
The French dude is like suffering and bleeding to death, and he has this giant like introspective moment of like, you know, we could have been friends. We live next to each other. Like,
yeah.
Do you like fishing? I like fishing. We could have gone fishing together. Like, why are we here? Why are we killing each other?
He says all that.
I think it's either an internal monologue or him speaking, because I can't remember that well.
Because that's the impression I got from the performance.
Yeah.
In this version is
that it was internalized.
Yeah, you could see that on the guy's face.
Yeah.
And in his actions. Because there's a couple of times that happens where he comes face to face with a soldier and you can see the realization of like, this is just
stupid.
This is just another young man.
Yeah.
Like this guy, because he knows what his situation is, that he's been brought into this under the false pretenses of it being, you know, glorified.
We're marching on Paris by the end of the year.
Yeah, and he knows like the hardships he's been put through and him seeing his friends die, whatever, and like you see these moments where he just suddenly sees the humanity in the person in front of him, and he hesitates and he's like, without saying anything, and I think that's powerful. That you can see that he's looking at this person being like, this is just a guy. This is just someone else who's in the same situation, who's been put here by someone in power who's never gonna die as a result of this, who is just doing his best and trying to survive the way I'm trying to survive.
Yeah.
Because you see it again at the end of the movie. Because there's the guy that he like falls down the trench fighting, and then they kind of step back from each other, and you see him kind of they both just stop.
Yeah.
But then he gets, spoiler alert, stabbed from behind.
Yeah.
And I think it's pretty sad. But yeah. So do you think it was done better in the?
I just think
CBS
from
version?
because this movie is made by a German director, it's in German.
Yeah.
They've not held back on covering their actors so you can barely see their faces, which is one of the things that's like at the moment very topical of like how much do you hide your actors. Mandalorian did it really well. Halo needs to burn in a fire. You're right that his acting is very powerful.
Yeah.
But if you didn't know that, if you didn't have that background, I don't know if you would get as much impact.
What background?
From seeing the other adaptation or reading the book.
I haven't seen any other adaptation.
I know, but you're saying that whole moment was very powerful, but you... Yeah. But you didn't have the context of, like... what the context that I had from the previous movie.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is that even without that context, that's what I read into it.
Yeah.
Which is this... So I think they did it well, because as someone who doesn't have the context, I was able to read that's what he was thinking. Yeah,
I'm just saying some audiences would miss out because the actors are covered in mud and it's in German.
Yeah, I just think I mean, personally, I think it's better filmmaking to do it the way they've done it.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Because if it's all exposition, it's like, why are you like, you don't need to tell me all this.
Yeah,
I can see, because like I can empathize with him as a human, and I can see that he's empathizing with another human.
There was another thing that reminded me of that. Story about two gang members playing Russian roulette. Man.
What?
High school English was a time, man.
Okay.
The other sequence, obviously, is Kat's death.
Yeah.
Because I think in... when they're going across the field and they're talking about the future... And talking about, like, I'm a cobbler, like, you have to go to university, you friggin' idiot. Like,
yeah.
I think that sequence, I could be wrong. It's been a long time since I saw the movie. I think that sequence happens after Cat gets shot.
Oh, okay.
So he's carrying him down the road talking about their future together. And then only when he gets to the Medicaid station where the dude's just like, you could have saved your chance, your friend's dead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
What are you apologizing for?
You just, like, I stopped sentence and you expected me to carry on and there was this dead air
for a second. Okay, sorry.
You were just, like, not paying attention to what I was doing.
No, I wasn't not paying attention. I was trying to see, I was going to very quickly bring up the plot summary of the book to see what way happens in the book, to see if it's mentioned in the...
Because I think he goes home in the book, doesn't he? I'm pretty sure he goes home
in the book he's killed.
Oh, okay.
In the book he's killed in October 1918. He's killed because the title of the book comes from. So I don't think in the book
a report.
Yeah, in the book I don't think it's the day that the ceasefire is happening.
Yeah,
I think that's like very sad and powerful in the movie. But in the book it's about a month before the ceasefire, October. But he's killed on a day that's otherwise remarkably peaceful, and the report to the officials is it's all quiet on the Western Front. Like there was no news today.
Yeah.
And that's where it comes from. That like he's had everything taken from him and then he dies, and that's just not even news.
Yeah. Could you imagine a day in our modern era with just no news? Could you imagine how people would freak out? Just not knowing what the hell was going on with, like, some dickhead getting arrested for human trafficking in Romania. Was it Romania?
Was what, Romania?
That stupid Andrew dude. Was it Romania that he got arrested in?
I don't remember. Was it Bulgarian? I don't know. I don't remember.
And then,
now.
like, one of the creators of...
I don't care enough about him, to be
creators
honest.
of Rick and Morty being done for, like, grooming kids and, like, how... Could you imagine how peaceful the world would be and how happy everyone was if there was just nothing for news? What's the news? Oh, the weather's nice.
Yeah.
Some people played some sport.
The wiki plot summary for the book doesn't specify... how Kat's death happens.
Right.
So I don't know, that's not helpful. I did want to talk about this the scene with Kat's death. In that I think it is like remarkably paralleled in 1917. Because except in 1917 it happens near the beginning of the movie, whereas in All Quiet on the Western Front, it's towards the end. But it's in both cases it is two soldiers who have been stationed together and fighting together and surviving together arrive at a farmhouse and try to get food, and then one of them is fatally wounded by someone at that farmhouse and dies before the other one can get them to a medic.
Yeah.
And it's sad in both movies. But I like watching, because we watched All Quiet on the Western Front first, and watching 1917 and that scene happening, I was like, this is weirdly paralleling them.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's deliberate, because later on, the Schofield meets or comes across two German soldiers that he kills, or I think he only kills one of them. Did he only kill one of them?
Yeah,
I think he only kills one of them.
Just shoulder barges the other one.
Yeah, and gets out of the way, and their names are Boimer and Muller, and which are two of the friends in All Quiet on the Western Front. So it does intentionally reference the book, but I don't know if that was a deliberate reference that he's killed at a farmhouse. So I thought that was interesting.
It's a really weird sequence. Because I looked it up, and a lot of people have like a theory, but I don't think the filmmakers or the writers have ever come out and specified. So, for those who don't know, World War I was weird, as I've explained previously in this episode.
Just in case you didn't know, it was weird.
I reference a movie, no, not a movie, a song that happened recently because it was Christmas. We all know it as Snoopy's Christmas. Talking about Snoopy the dog fighting in World War I over the Battle of Europe in a biplane and getting shot down by the Red Baron. Now, what's interesting about this whole concept about pilots is they were like another level. You had to be from a wealthy family, you had to be highly educated, and that was the only way you were being given a plane. This is like, do you know what a plane is? And they'd be like, yeah, it's a flying thing. It's like, cool, we've put guns on them. Have fun, bye-bye. Because I told you, I looked in the cockpit of the Tiger Moth when it was taken down, right? Those who don't know, it was a plane. Anyway, not relevant, but...
But those who don't know, it was a plane.
It was a singular winged plane, not a biplane, or the crazy triplanes that they came out with. Less powered engines, more wings, more lift. Crazy timing belts for the machine guns so you don't shoot through your own propeller, because the machine guns like leveled behind next to the pilot in between the propeller, and weird placement, but timing belts worked it out. They have like liquid bubbles, like what you'd use to measure a shelf, as instruments inside those old planes.
Gotta make sure you're upright.
Yeah.
You don't know you're up from you're down.
Yeah. Like, bananas. Absolutely bananas. Like, in comparison today. Like, today everything's done by... You can't check how much fuel there is in your plane without 17 different computers telling you, the concept of, being able to launch missiles at targets that you can't even physically see. It's bananas. Versus literally having to fly up to somebody and shoot them with a gun. But they were a different class. They were like the elite.
Yeah.
And special treatment was given to them by basically the equivalent of giving like how we have the Geneva Convention and you can't kill prisoners.
Mm-hmm.
Even in World War One, where there was none of that, and people were getting gassed left, right, and centre, and obviously, civilians were getting killed in the crossfire, and especially in the early days of the war. It was basically battlefield etiquette if you shot down a plane. Like that, the person wasn't taken as a POW and sent to prison. The person was taken a POW and then given back.
Right.
Because they were the upper crust. They weren't the regular dirty in the trenches ground troops.
Yeah.
There's a really famous photo of, I think it's an RAF pilot, getting a haircut in between flights. So he was just like, well, I'm a bit scruffy, boys, tidy it all up and I'll get back in my plane and go shoot down Jerry again. Like, that's how upper crust thing, you're rolling your eyes.
I know, I was going to say, and if they wanted to, they could restore that photo at photo restore NZ.
Yeah, if you have that original, if that's in your personal collection photo, I don't think I think it's a pretty well known photo. But just absolutely bananas. And every single year, at every single Christmas, I'm reminded because of how bananas Snoopy's Christmas. If you don't know what I'm talking about with Snoopy's Christmas, look it up, because it is a very famous. It's famous in New Zealand. I don't know if have you heard it before? Do you know the song I'm talking about?
I don't know the song. I'm very
familiar. You don't know the song?
You've mentioned the song to me, but I don't think I wouldn't be familiar with the song. I think people in the United States would be.
Yeah.
I think Peanuts was really big in the United States, and I think the Snoopy, the Charlie Brown cartoons and things were famous there. Where they weren't as big in Ireland, but I collected Snoopy comics in the compilation books of them, but I wasn't into the
Christmas bells, oh Christmas bells, singing through the land. Yeah.
We're gonna have to pay copyright.
That was less than 30 seconds, and my tone is completely off. No AI would be able to pick that up.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's one of my somebody I know's favorite Christmas song. You know why? Because there's no covers of it.
Right. Okay.
No one does a cover of Snoopy's Christmas.
Well, we'll release one.
What? Why? I can't sing. You can sing.
Yeah.
I've heard you sing.
Okay. I'm not gonna sing. I don't know it, so I can't sing it.
Okay.
I'll learn it and we can release our own Snoopy's Christmas
Snoopy
cover.
fights the Red Baron and he gets shot down, and instead of getting taken prisoner, they just hang out and have Christmas dinner.
Yeah, of course they do.
It was a weird time.
Anyway, were you going to connect that to the pilot landing in the movie?
Yes, so the pilot lands in the movie and just stabs Blake up, and I was just like, that probably wouldn't have happened, and I googled it.
They pull him out, and then they're like, oh no, don't, because Schofield is like, do we kill him? And Blake's like, no, get him some water, he needs water, we need to look after him.
Yeah.
And then the German pilot just...
And the explanation is like, oh, he was confused and injured. It's like... So your response to someone helping you is to stab them. Like, what?
Well, he couldn't understand what they were saying. He didn't speak English. So maybe he thought they were going to kill him.
Yeah.
And he wanted to kill him.
But then
first.
why wouldn't they have just left him in the burning plane?
Maybe he thought they were taking him as a prisoner of war.
But they weren't allowed to. They'd take him back.
He might not have known that.
I'm pretty sure it was well known by 1917.
I don't know.
It's just, it's weird to me. Weird sequence.
Fair enough.
Man, it would have been terrifying seeing a tank for the first time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what they were showing in All Quiet on the Western Front when they look over the trench and they don't know.
Holy shit!
Do you think, because we're releasing this before the Oscars, well, we're recording this before the Oscar nominations have been announced, but there is no way All Quiet on the Western Front is not getting an international feature nomination.
Yeah.
I was going to say, do you think it's going to win Best International Feature?
I don't know. I'd have to see what... I would have to make my predictions when I've seen everything else.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Because I know it as part of your... I was going to say regiment, but I don't think that's the right word. I think my brain's just fully in military thinking at the moment. schedule's not the right word. Ritual. No, it's to.
That works.
Yeah, your ritual to then watch everything that's nominated. So
I try to watch as many
yeah.
nominees as possible so that I can, have a fair judgment on what I think will and can and should win.
Yeah.
Because I like watching the Oscars every year.
Wolfwalkers.
Wolfwalkers didn't win.
Still calling out for Wolfwalkers.
Which a movie I haven't seen yet, but I think is possibly going to win Best Animated Feature is Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, which I need to watch. Marcel the Shell with Shoes On.
Michelle.
I can't even say it. Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. Marcel.
Marshmallow
okay.
with shoes on.
You're just making fun of me at this point.
I am.
I think...
She sells seashells.
So this is going to be a ridiculous thing to say in this podcast episode because by the time it's released, people will already know whether or not this has happened. I think All Quiet on the Western Front is going to be one of the 10 nominees for Best Picture. I think it's not only going to be Best International Feature, I think it's going to be nominated for Best Picture. And then if it is nominated for Best Picture and doesn't win Best International Feature, then that's going to be a mess because if something else wins Best International Feature and it was nominated for Best Picture, they'd be like, wait, why wasn't this other thing nominated? I also hope that Colleen Kuhn is nominated for Best International Feature, but I don't think it's going to win. And I don't necessarily think it should win. I think this was a better film.
Controversial statements there.
Yeah, but I would love... It's shortlisted, and I would love for Colleen Kuhn to be nominated because if it is the first film in the Irish language to be nominated for Best International Feature.
Wait, we watched that, didn't we?
I watched it, you didn't.
Sure I watched it. What was the movie that I watched?
I don't know, what did you watch? What do you mean?
I watched a movie that was in Irish.
What was it? What happened in it?
I don't remember. I watched a lot. I watched an exorbitant amount of movies.
I don't know what you watched in Irish. What did you watch in Irish?
I don't remember.
Was it about a little girl who is sent to live with her cousins because, I don't know, she's like one of like 6 sisters and she goes to live with them because they lost a child and she starts to come out of her shell and then ends up having to go home?
Maybe not.
No, you didn't watch it with me, so... Unless you watched it by yourself, which would be surprising.
Yeah.
I don't know, what Irish language film have you seen?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm confused now. You'll have to check Letterboxd. We are on Letterboxd, by the way.
Yeah, we are on Letterboxd.
If you want sneaky behind the scenes of movies we watch that aren't related to the podcast.
We're also on YouTube.
Are you going to mention that? Oh, yeah, because it's months ago.
Yeah,
It was months ago, Lisa. Let it go.
Because I hadn't... Because it won't have been mentioned in previous episodes because I hadn't done it yet, even though we pre-recorded them.
And we have a Discord.
Yeah. Is there anything more you want to say about the films generally, or do you want to get into trivia and things?
No, I'm very sweaty. It is very warm in here.
I did want to talk about music. I thought the music was good in both.
Yeah, because they're more scores than like your standard. You know, Taika Waititi does a good job of putting music into movies.
Oh yeah, I know, but like even as scores go, I think there were notably good scores.
Yeah.
I think I had to look up the person who did All Quiet on the Western Front's score because it sounded a lot like the music in Dark to me, and I was like, is it the person from Dark? But it was not. It's a composer named Volker Bertelmann, and this is not the first film we featured on the podcast that person did the music for, because they also did the music for Ammonite, which is interesting. 1917, the music was done by Thomas Newman, who was like, I love Thomas Newman's music in general, so it was no wonder that I was like, ooh, I like this music. My favorite Thomas Newman score would be either Road to Perdition or Finding Nemo. Because he's done a few Pixar movies, a few Bond films. I looked him up because I was assuming he'd been No, he'd won Oscars before. He's never won an Oscar, Thomas Newman. He's been nominated 15 times.
Jesus.
Sometimes, on 2 occasions, he had 2 nominations in the same year.
Well, at least he's getting work.
Yeah, he gets lots of work. I mean, he did Shawshank Redemption, American Beauty. He's done all the recent Bond films. Like, he's prolific.
Didn't Billie Eilish sing for the Bond film?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Original song.
Yeah.
Yeah, Thomas Newman has been, I think he was nominated for he was nominated for original song for Wall-E, I think. Is that right? I think,
I don't know.
or fine. He was nominated for one of the Pixar ones he did. He was nominated for original song, and then other than that, I think all of his other nominations have been for score. But he never won, which is shocking.
I will say one thing that annoyed the shit out of me watching All Quiet on the Western Front is the Netflix, man. You gotta do something about your friggin' subtitles.
Yeah, so we watched it in German with English subtitles, but the English subtitles included audio or not audio description, but descriptions of background sounds and things.
Yeah. So annoying.
Yeah, because I would have liked to just have subtitles of what was said.
Yeah.
Without
ominous music plays.
Ominous music playing.
Yeah.
Wolf noises.
Yeah, loud noise. You're like
gunfire. It's like I can hear the gunfire.
If you want to have subtitles for people who have hearing issues, well done. Make that an option.
Yeah, but have it as a separate option.
But have it as a separate option, not friggin'.
Yeah, because I double checked that we weren't in the wrong.
Yeah.
Subtitle thing, and I was like, no, okay, that's weird. I also want to shout out the guy who played Powell, your friend Powell Boimer.
Okay.
This is his first thing he's ever acted in. He was fantastic. He was really good. So his name is Felix Kammerer. I had to double check how to pronounce his last name. Felix is a name I know, but I was like Kammerer.
I'm not even gonna try.
Kammerer.
Yeah.
He's fantastic, and also he's Austrian, and this is his first film. But also George Mackay, who plays Lance Corporal Schofield in 1917. They look like they could be brothers. If you showed me those 2 actors and if you just took a picture of each of them and put them next to each other and were like, oh yeah, these guys are 2 brothers who are actors, I'd be like, oh cool.
All the monarchy and leadership during World War One were all like cousins, so it's not surprising.
Fair enough. I don't think either of these actors are
related.
Are actually related. But yeah, I just thought it was interesting that we're comparing these 2 films with these main characters that we're following, on their journey to try and survive the war on the Western Front, and yet the actors are strikingly similar looking. I just thought it was interesting, but I did. Yeah, I just really appreciated, how good of a job he did on this, with this being his first role, because I thought it was really well. Whereas, George Mackay's first role was in 2003 in Peter Pan, so he's been around for a while.
Fair.
And also 1917 had a ridiculous amount of.
Oh yeah, it was hilarious watching
names.
your response to all the supporting cast.
It was like, oh, Colin Firth is in this, and it's like, oh okay, oh all right, because Andrew Scott. Who else is it? Mark Strong. I recognized Mark Strong's voice before he even spoke. Or sorry, before he sorry, before they showed his face. I meant to say I recognized his voice before they showed his face. And he had Benedict Cumberbatch showing up, Richard Madden.
Yeah.
It was a ridiculous cast. Apparently, so when I was looking at trivia afterwards, apparently part of how they got so many people into it was that they literally just promised that they wouldn't have to do any kind of promo for it.
Huh.
So literally, I swear I took that down, but I'm I can't even see where I've taken down. I just remember saying it. Did I not write that down? But anyway, it's a true fact anyway, apparently, that they just, the reason they were able to get so many people to play just really small parts in it was that they didn't have to do a single bit of promo for it. They didn't have to mention it in an interview or do any kind of press. And they were like, yeah, alright, we'll do it. One of the trivia facts. This is fun. I've taken this down because I know for a fact that it's false, and I was like, why is this in the trivia? So this is in the IMDb trivia for 1917. It says the fourth film that Colin Firth has appeared in that went on to win Best Picture. He previously appeared in The English Patient, Shakespeare in Love, and The King's Speech.
Okay.
1917 didn't win Best Picture. Parasite won.
Weird.
So whoever wrote that is in like...
So it's a Mandela effect.
Yeah, someone's in a Mandela effect. Someone came over from another universe to write that 1917 won Best Picture, but
those
it
damn
didn't.
bears with their Jewish heritage.
Parasite won that year. And Parasite, rightfully. Parasite is a fantastic film.
Yeah.
I love Parasite. But I did enjoy 1917.
Yeah.
It's beautifully shot, well acted. There's a lot of suspension of disbelief in it, though. There's a lot of, like, you know, like, the plane that's shot down happens to come right at them, even though we're in the middle of nowhere. The second that Blake dies, suddenly there's an entire squad of other soldiers, even though they've been traveling across the land alone for ages, and, like, suddenly there's, like, 100 other soldiers just happen to be right there. They're like, oh, hey, what are you doing?
What did I say? I said Schrodinger's milk.
Schrodinger's milk, yeah, he finds milk, and then later on, so Chekhov's milk.
Chekhov's milk.
You did say Schrodinger's milk at the time, which I thought was hilarious. Yeah. But yeah, he finds milk, and then he pours it in his thing and never drinks it, and then he finds a woman with a baby, and she's like, the baby needs milk, and he's like, oh, I've got milk.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. He, like, ends up in a river and washed down a waterfall, and then he, like, washes ashore right at the spot where the soldiers that he's trying to get the message to are, and none of it makes any sense.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. It's a lot less realistic. It's much more fantastical than All Quiet on the Western Front. I think that's part of why also I was like, oh yeah, I can connect this with Lord of the Rings. It's a fantasy.
But I will have to say that the cinematography the entire time is fantastic.
Yes, cinematography is fantastic, and it did win an Oscar for that.
Yeah.
It was nominated for 10 Oscars and it won 3. It won cinematography, visual effects, and sound mixing.
Yeah.
Anyway, trivia. Let's do a bit of trivia. I've taken a lot of trivia, but I'll try to just skim through it so we're not recording for like another 10 hours.
I'd leave.
This is one that I thought you'd find interesting.
Mild shock.
What? The director it says Edward. I assume his name is Edvard. It's just spelt the same as Edward. I'm assuming he's German. So, Edvard Berger. He got someone named Marek Svitek to train the acting team on the shooting scenes, and they were trained in military simulation using real firearms.
You're talking about All Quiet on the Western Front.
All Quiet on the Western Front. Yes.
It's just like that's a lot of German people for a
for 1917.
Yeah.
No, yeah. So they were trained, like they did like actual military training essentially with real firearms to learn to do all the shooting in the film.
Because that's how they got the performance out of the crew in Saving Private Ryan, is they had a boot camp together, and the only person that wasn't invited was your boy.
My boy.
Your one.
Which one is? Who's my boy?
Is it Mick?
Mark Watney.
Yeah.
My boy Mark Watney. I already mentioned that they marched in the order that they die. Yeah, and that. Hang on, skip all these.
Skip.
Yeah, I think I've already mentioned most of the trivia that I had for All Quiet on the Western Front. In 1917, so there seems to be a misconception that 1917 is all like one continuous shot.
Yeah, no.
There's no way to do that. So the longest continuous shot in it is 8.5 minutes long.
Yeah.
And there were 48 cuts in total throughout the film. So there's 48 shots.
Yeah.
Which is not, I mean...
In comparison to any movie that has Liam Neeson in it and they need 17 shots of him just climbing over a bloody fence.
Yeah. So 30... Yeah, so the shortest unbroken shot was 39 seconds. So there's one shot that's only 39 seconds, and then the longest one is 8.5, so the rest are in the middle there. So probably most of them are 4 or 5 minutes long. it's inspired by Sir Sam Mendes' grandfather's experience World War One, based on his autobiography, which is just called, it's very blandly titled, The Autobiography of Alfred H. Mendes, 1897 to 1991. Alfred Mendes he entered the war at age 17 in 1916. He was 5'4", so when it was winter time, there was quite often a mist that reached as high as 6 feet across no man's land and the areas, the front essentially. Yeah. So being that he was 5'4", they used him as a messenger quite often because he could get across without being seen because the mist would cover him entirely. He also then had, it sounds like he developed a form of OCD from his experience in the trenches, just being covered in mud constantly for 2 years. He became obsessed with washing his hands all the time, but he didn't speak to anyone about his wartime experiences until he was in his 70s, and then he wrote this autobiography, which inspired his grandson to make this film, which is interesting. So they dug actual trenches for this film.
Yeah.
So they dug a bit over 1.5 kilometers of trenches. And they did that in Wiltshire, Hankley Common, and Govan, Scotland.
Hopefully nowhere on the border of the French, because they might get a bit of a...
No, I think those are all in the UK.
Yeah,
so
they are.
We're all right. But there were conservationists who were concerned that they could potentially disturb undiscovered remains in the area. So they requested an archaeological survey be conducted before any set construction began. So they did a full archaeological survey of the area first before they constructed the trenches to make sure that they weren't going to disturb any...
That's so UK meta. Don't dig a hole, you might discover dead bodies in there. What are you digging a hole for? Oh, we're going to play that there's dead bodies there.
Yeah, but I think it's good, the conservationists were informed and were able to get that consent to do the archaeological dig first to make sure that there was no, nothing that they were going to disturb. Apparently there was a quote from one of the extras who said that they can't help but laughing at the final shot of the film. So the opening and the ending of the film 1917 are bookended.
Yeah.
With Schofield sitting up against a tree with his eyes closed.
Yeah.
One, before they're sent to the mission, and the other when he's finally achieved everything he was trying to achieve. But apparently they had no idea that the ending was going to take place on that tree. So about 100 extras used that frequently to urinate on because the toilets were too far away.
Wow. So
when he's sitting there at that tree, he's it's where all of the extras were pissing.
Rough.
Which is hilarious. Only 4 soldiers are shown to be killed in combat in the film, which is crazy. Yeah. For a war movie, especially one that is relatively brutal, it's shocking that there's only actually four people shown to die. I think that's about it. I didn't bother to look at budget and box office because one of them's a Netflix production.
Yeah.
And also I couldn't find the budget for All Quiet on the Western Front anyway. But I saw a claim that it was the most expensive German production on Netflix, but I feel like that's not too difficult.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's gonna be nominated for at least one Oscar, so it makes sense. But yeah, anyway, they're both good films, I think. Both well-made films.
Yeah. No complaints from me.
Yeah, well, you love war movies.
Yeah.
So you'd just be happy watching any movie about war.
Yeah, it's interesting because of I don't agree with you on certain points, but
what?
Just you're anti-war,
You don't agree with being anti-war?
No.
You want us all to fight each other forever?
No. I'm just saying that we can't live in a humans aren't developed enough for us to live in peace with each other.
I think that's a shame.
I know it's a shame. I'm just saying that the truth is not always what you want to hear.
I think there's a lot of unnecessary war, though.
Yeah. Anyway, on that note,
I think there's a lot of which, like I said, All Quiet on the Western Front does a good job of depicting. I think there's a lot of glorification of war.
Yeah,
war if war was just a necessity is one thing, but war when people are glorifying it and saying, you know, like, oh, you're gonna do everyone proud and blah blah blah, and
yeah, but that's about manipulating the young into joining up because you're just like, hey, you're gonna go suffer for years until you get shot. Have fun, bye. They'd be just like, fuck you, I'm not doing that.
Well, I think that's a more honest approach to it, and I think it's like a huge problem I have with the whole system is the manipulation and the fact that they target young and vulnerable people.
Yeah, because they're the people you want as soldiers.
And especially vulnerable people, because they, like, a lot of places will give incentives for people to join, you know, like, you know, special accommodations for their families and things.
Personally, I think we'd have a lot less problems youth culture-wise if we, not like as the level of like Israel, but if everybody was required to do military service, because there is a lot of like confidence building. Hey, you've been told it by another ex-military person.
But that person is a person who's probably listening to the podcast, and we have this conversation on a regular basis.
Yeah, and I'm on his side.
I don't like that.
Well, that's on you.
It's because that person does, I think, glorify war to an extent.
Okay. On that
Well,
note,
I mean, that person would gladly just go off and fight today for the glory of it.
Oh, yeah, we both agreed at one point if the Pope had called a crusade, we would have joined. But anyway.
Oh, my God.
And I'm not even Catholic.
You're not even, I was going to say. Like, I don't get it. There's no glory in it. I don't understand the glorification of war because there is no glory. And there is no honor. People talk about it being like an honorable. It's not honorable. There's nothing honorable about it. I
would say that you might have a different tone if you spoke to somebody, a natural veteran, and have their perspective of it.
These movies are based on the perspectives of actual veterans, and one of them is incredibly anti-war. Yeah,
from World War I. Like I said, as we discussed previously in the episode, it was a weird-ass time for war. Mm-hmm. Anyway,
I think war in general is weird.
Those multiple notes.
Join our Discord. Tell us what you think about war.
Are you pro or con war? Use our promo code ItTakes2 on photorestorenz.com to get 25% off your purchase. Mm-hmm. We have a YouTube channel, which is, if you look for It Takes Two on YouTube.
Yeah, It Takes Two NZ is our handle, all one word. On Twitter and Instagram, we're ittakes2_pod, and on Facebook, just It Takes Two Pod, and our website is ittakes2.co.nz.
Stay safe out there. Don't let the rats eat you.
Yeah, no, please don't do that.
Yeah, don't let the trench rats eat you.
Horrible. Okay, goodbye.